Welcome back to Sense and Sensibility. We are talking trade today, and before your eyes glass over, it's actually on a little bit of a personal level, although we're kind of giving a little bit of the history of trade, especially with China, because my expert guest is former Governor Jon Huntsman, and he was also the ambassador to Singapore and China, so he's got a lot of knowledge in this area. So before the break, we were talking about there's a bit of an imbalance right now. We are receiving more goods from China than the U.S. is sending out. But where's our protections? I know we had talked kind of specifically about basketballs. Let's say I want to manufacture basketballs in the U.S., send them over to China, but then somebody in China goes, oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. I want to make those basketballs and make money off of it. I don't want, some other country sending their stuff to me. Well, what about the U.S.? Why are we getting all this stuff from China and we're not seeing the same protections over here?
We're getting a lot of stuff from China. And first of all, one of the real reasons we're talking about China is not only because I'm here with you and I've lived there and dealt with this issue, but for Utah, China is about our largest export market, our largest trading partner, as it is with most states in America. So how did China get to where it is in terms of trading right now? When it opened up in the late 1970s economically, it embarked on the easiest growth program of all, which is to discount your currency. It's to draw on cheap labor, which China has in great abundance. It's to allow the government basically to protect the marketplace against any foreign imports. So that's part of the issue that we were talking about earlier, protected marketplace, and then exporting to the major markets of the world. So China for 30 to 40 years has been based on a discounted currency and drawing from cheap labor, exporting a lot of its products to the United States and Europe. Why? Because we are the largest consumers in the world. No market even comes close to people who buy products here in the United States. And with China manufacturing and exporting a lot, we're, of course, buying a lot of those products. What about protection in our home market? Well, we've had episodes of protectionism in our own market, and some of them for very good reasons. We have trade rules that allow us to close markets to unfair competition. So if you go back to the 1980s, we actually closed our market to steel imports, mostly coming in from Japan and Korea, and a little bit from China. It's called a VRA, a Voluntary Restraint Agreement. We did the same thing with motorcycles when Ronald Reagan went to the protection of Harley Davidson. A lot of people don't remember that period. We also had some trade restraints in for cars, for automobiles, which were coming in, we felt, based on unfair trade practices. So we, from time to time, employ measures that will close or restrict markets until we can figure out a way to resolve a dispute that oftentimes we feel is derived from unfair trade practices in the country where these goods are manufactured.
Okay. So let's say I'm not in steel, I'm not in motorcycles, I'm not dealing with basketballs, any of the electronic stuff, aside from maybe I buy some. I'm not in any of these industries. Why should I care one way or the other whether we're sending more stuff out to China or they're bringing more stuff in to us? How does this affect me on a personal level?
Well, if your country is more competitive, if you're manufacturing and selling stuff, not just to our state and our country, but a lot of markets around the world, then we're growing economically. So a lot of companies here in Utah wouldn't be doing as well as they're doing if they didn't have access to other markets to sell their product into. And so we're a trading state. Utah's a trading state. We trade with dozens and dozens of major countries of the world. So that creates jobs. So the rule of thumb is basically for every $1 billion that you export, and we export billions of dollars as a state, you create maybe 10 to 12,000 jobs. So it's a job creator. That's number one. So your neighbor down the street may have his or her job based upon the export market that they're selling products into.
And if that person has a job, then they have money to go out to a restaurant, maybe to buy food or go to the movies or whatever.
Right.
So we're not just talking about the person who goes to the steel factory to ship that out.
That's right. We're talking about people who can then pay the bills, who can buy a home, buy a car, pay the bills, and it's all derived from from companies that are internationally competitive. They're not just selling to the backyard. They're not just selling to a neighboring state, but they're selling to other countries. And in the state, we have a good many of those. It's also important because when you walk into a Walmart, just as an example, or a Cabela's, where I bought some shoes just last week, check the box to see where the product is manufactured. You'll find that they're from all over the place, but a good number of them from China, from Vietnam, less and less from Europe because they're not as competitive as they once were, but more and more from the United States. I would argue that we're becoming a more competitive nation. So you see as many of our products in foreign markets as you do products from China in our market.
Okay, well, how are they doing that? Because I know.
And by the way, the point there is the price you pay for those shoes at Cabela's or whatever that product is out of Walmart is sometimes made more affordable because of our trade flows. Whenever you stop or block something, prices go up. And that's unfair to the consumer. So you generally try to keep trade flows as free and fair and devoid of barriers as possible, because the consumer, in the end, when they go into the store to buy something, benefits generally from freer trade flows.
Well, you were saying that a lot of the American-made products are now a little bit more affordable, but starting January 1st, a couple days, 2 days ago, the minimum wage went up to like $15 an hour in about 15 states.
Mm-hmm.
So, but if the person in China is getting $1 a day versus $15 an hour here, how is that product more affordable for the U.S.?
Well, the dynamic on wages in China is changing considerably. So in the case of Huntsman Corporation, a company I'm very familiar with, we can manufacture a product in the United States and export it all the way to China cheaper than they can make it in China today. And a lot of companies are finding that to be the case because wages are going up in China. There are more people leaving the workforce than entering the workforce because they have an age bulge right now in their demographics. They have an aging population, and the difficulty of doing business in China adds to the cost of getting things done there. So, apples to apples comparison. The United States is becoming a more competitive country, even when compared to countries like China. So we have to be careful when we talk about, the old adage, which is, we pay this in labor rates and they only pay that in China. There's a lot more to manufacturing and paying for a product and getting it sent to a marketplace than just what the wage rates are.
Do you know if the products coming from China, are they getting taxed more heavily than our products are going out to China?
That's a very, very good point. Our average weighted tariff for goods coming into the United States is about 2%. It's about the lowest anywhere in the world. You'll have Singapore and Hong Kong, just to mention a couple that are lower. The average weighted tariff in China is well over 10 or 12%.
Oh,
and that depends on the product. In some products, it's way beyond that. So getting goods into the U.S. market is easier because our taxes on those imported goods is low, but also our ability to distribute the product once it gets into the port of Los Angeles, for example, and needs to come into Salt Lake City, into the Cabela's retail outlet, there aren't a lot of barriers that stand in the way as compared to getting a product from, say, the port of Tianjin in northern China into a similar retail or distributor. There are lots of barriers and fees along the way. So we have a very free market for the most part here compared to the rest.